Homeless single mom of 3. Followed her German shepherd to a cabin with a dark secret. The rain hit the windshield like 1,000 nails. Rachel Carter's hands tightened on the steering wheel as the wipers squeaked uselessly, barely clearing the blur ahead. Her breath fogged the glass. The heater had died hours ago. In the back seat, 3 tired faces watched the world dissolve into shadow. "Mum, are we there yet?" Grace asked softly. "There's no there anymore, honey," Rachel murmured. Beside her, a German shepherd named Rex shifted restlessly, his ears twitching. He had sensed the storm before it came, pressing his head against Rachel's arm like he could absorb her worry. He was the only steady heartbeat left in the chaos that had become their lives. The road curved sharply through a dense forest of pines. The headlights caught the glint of rain-soaked bark, the reflection of a sign half buried in mud. No service road. Then the car sputtered once, twice, and died. Rachel slammed her palm on the steering wheel. "No, no, no, come on!" The engine clicked, useless. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains like an angry god. "Mama?" Mia's small voice wavered. "It's dark." "I know, sweetheart." Rachel forced calm into her tone. "We'll figure it out." Eli, 14 and already too protective for his age, leaned forward. "We passed a trail a few yards back. Maybe we can find shelter?" "Shelter where?" Rachel asked, half to herself. She opened the door and stepped into the downpour. The cold slapped her face, soaked through her jacket in seconds. She turned her eyes toward the forest. That's when Rex started barking. Not the frantic bark of fear, but the sharp, focused tone he used when he'd found something. Rachel had learned to trust that sound. "Rex, what is it?" The dog bolted into the trees, his tail flashing like a beacon. Rachel shouted, but he didn't stop. "Stay here." She ordered the kids, then grabbed the flashlight and ran after him. Branches whipped her face. Mud pulled at her shoes. But Rex's bark guided her, rhythmic and insistent. Through the sheets of rain, she saw it, a faint glimmer of light filtered through pine needles. A structure loomed ahead, hidden by vines and fog. It was a cabin. Rachel froze at the clearing's edge. The place looked ancient, logs darkened by time and weather, the roof half collapsed under the weight of moss and snow. But there was smoke, or what looked like it, a thin wisp rising from the crooked chimney before dissolving into the storm. Her pulse quickened. Someone was living here. "Rex," she whispered, "come back." He didn't. He pushed the door open with his nose and disappeared inside. "Rex!" Rachel hesitated. The forest howled behind her, a chorus of wind and water. The car was too far now, and the children waited, huddled in the dark. She had no choice. She followed. The cabin's door creaked open wider as she entered. The smell hit her first. Old wood, mildew, and something else. Smoke, maybe, or dust trapped in memory. Her flashlight beam swept across a small, single-room space. A stone fireplace, a table overturned, chairs rotted to splinters. And there, lying beside the hearth, was Rex. His ears perked, tail wagging once, then twice. His gaze was fixed on the wall. Rachel approached carefully. "What is it, boy?" The light trembled in her hand as she aimed it at what he was staring at. Words. Faint, carved deep into the timber, half hidden beneath grime and soot. She reached out and traced the grooves with her fingers. "The truth sleeps beneath." The words seemed to breathe under her touch. Behind her, footsteps crunched on the porch. Rachel spun, heart pounding, flashlight shaking. But it was only Eli, soaked and panting. "Mum, the others are inside the car. It's freezing. We need to stay here." She nodded, still catching her breath. "Get them. Bring the blankets." As Eli ran back into the storm, Rachel took in the details she'd missed before. There were 2 coffee cups still on the table, one cracked but clean, the other stained by time. A lantern hung crooked above the fireplace, the wick long dry. And on the floor near Rex's paws, a small photograph, water-damaged but still visible. It showed a woman standing in front of the same cabin, holding a notebook. Her face was half-turned, eyes fixed on something beyond the frame. Rachel flipped it over. On the back, written in neat cursive, Eleanor Whitmore, 1956. The name meant nothing to her, but Rex let out a low growl, his gaze shifting toward the floorboards near the hearth. The sound wasn't anger. It was warning. Rachel crouched beside him, pressing her ear to the wood. For a moment, through the thunder, she thought she heard something. A hum, low and steady, like the whisper of air moving through unseen cracks. She looked around the room again. The carved words, the smoke she'd seen earlier, the faint warmth radiating from the stones. The cabin wasn't empty. She stood slowly, scanning the corners. "Hello?" Her voice echoed, swallowed by the storm. "If someone's here, we don't mean any harm." Rex barked once, short, sharp, and turned toward the window. Rachel followed his gaze. Out beyond the trees, half hidden by mist, a small red light blinked once. Then again. Her stomach dropped. That wasn't firelight. It was the recording light of a drone. Rachel's breath caught. Whoever owned this cabin, or whatever secret it held, already knew they were here. Outside, thunder roared again, drowning her whisper. "What have we walked into?" Rex growled softly, positioning himself between her and the door, as if ready for whatever came next. And somewhere out in the forest, behind the rain and the static of wind, a camera lens blinked once more before vanishing into the night. Morning came grey and heavy, the storm still whispering through the trees. The cabin smelled of damp wood and cold ashes. Rachel had spent the night half awake, listening to Rex's pacing footsteps near the hearth. Every few minutes, his claws tapped the floor, circled, and stopped. When she finally sat up, Rex was already staring at the same spot on the floorboards, eyes locked, ears twitching. He let out a low growl that wasn't anger, but a warning. "Rex, enough," Rachel said gently, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "It's just wood, buddy." But he didn't move. Instead, he dug at the corner where the boards met stone, paws scraping so hard the sound echoed through the room. "Mom," Grace groaned from her blanket pile. "Make him stop. It's creepy." Rachel sighed, reaching for the flashlight. The morning light hadn't yet cut through the clouds. She crouched down beside the dog and tapped the floor with her knuckles. Hollow. Rex's ears perked. He looked at her, tail thumping once. "Okay," she whispered. "That's odd." Mia sat cross-legged nearby, clutching her stuffed bear. "He hears someone," she said matter-of-factly. Rachel looked up. "What do you mean?" "The lady," Mia replied. "The one named Eleanor. She keeps calling him." Grace rolled her eyes. "Mia, don't start." But Rex turned at the sound of the name, ears pricking sharply. He whined once, then looked back at the floor. Rachel froze. "You said Eleanor." Mia nodded, as if it were obvious. "She said Rex is a good boy. She says he found the right family." For a long moment, no one spoke. Wind rattled the shutters. The fire had gone cold. Rachel's pulse thudded against her throat. "Honey," she said slowly, "you've been having bad dreams, right?" Mia shook her head. "No, Mum, she talks when it rains." Eli appeared from the back room, rubbing his eyes. "Who's talking?" "An imaginary friend," Grace muttered. Rachel stood abruptly, needing movement to break the tension. "All right," she said. "We're cleaning this place up today. It's warmer here than the car, and we'll figure out what to do next." They spent the morning sweeping out debris and stacking old firewood. The kids argued, laughed, fell quiet again, life edging its way back through fear. Rex followed Rachel from room to room, sniffing corners, occasionally pausing to stare at the walls like he was listening. Behind the fireplace, Rachel found a small shelf covered by a warped panel. Inside were a few objects left behind by whoever had lived here decades ago: a chipped teacup, a silver locket, and a leather-bound book swollen from years of moisture. Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. The spine was stamped faintly in gold. E. Whitmore, 1956. Eleanor. Rachel breathed. The pages crackled when she opened them. The first line, written in neat script, read, "If you are reading this, then the truth still matters." Eli leaned over her shoulder. Who was she? I don't know, Rachel said, scanning the next lines. But she lived here. The entries grew darker as she turned the pages. The woman wrote of threats, of men who came at night demanding her husband's land deeds, of something she'd uncovered while working at the county office. They forged the records. One entry read, "Blackridge Timber has stolen half the valley. I have proof. I must hide it beneath the heart of this home." Rachel whispered the words aloud, her voice trembling. "Beneath the heart of this home." Eli frowned. That could mean anything. A cellar, maybe. Grace crossed her arms. Or maybe it means exactly what Rex has been trying to tell us. They all looked at the dog. He had returned to the hearth, paw pressed against the same patch of floor, his head tilted, eyes bright with something between instinct and understanding. Rachel knelt beside him. "You're scaring me, buddy. What are you trying to say?" Rex barked once. Sharp, certain. Then he lay down with his head against the wood, whining softly. That's when Mia spoke again, her small voice cutting through the heavy silence. "She says it's still down there." Rachel turned slowly. "What is, Mia?" "The proof," she answered, as if repeating something she heard clearly. "Eleanor hid it. She's waiting for us to find it before the bad man does." Grace shivered. "Bad man? What bad man?" Mia's gaze drifted to the window. "The one in the woods." Rachel crossed to the glass, heart hammering. Outside, rain still fell in thin sheets. Nothing moved but the sway of branches. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That night, long after the children had fallen asleep, Rachel sat by the fire reading more of Eleanor's journal. The entries grew frantic near the end. Mentions of drones and surveillance didn't exist back then, but Eleanor wrote of eyes in the forest and machines that hum like insects. Thunder rumbled again. Rex lifted his head, growling low, eyes fixed on the window. Rachel stood, her nerves fraying. "It's just the storm," she told him. But outside, something blinked, a red dot, faint, moving slowly along the tree line. Her breath caught. "Oh, God!" Rex snarled now, teeth bared, body tense. The dog moved between her and the window, muscles rippling beneath wet fur. Rachel grabbed the flashlight and flung the door open, sweeping the beam into the rain. Nothing but forest. The red light was gone. Behind her a floorboard creaked. She spun, light trembling across the walls. Eli stood at the loft ladder, half awake. "Mom, what's wrong?" Rachel forced a smile she didn't feel. "Nothing. Go back to sleep." But when she turned back to the fireplace, she saw it, just for an instant, fresh dirt scattered across the floor where Rex had been digging earlier, and one corner of the wood, now slightly lifted, as if something underneath had pushed back. Rex moved closer, pressing his nose to the gap, tail stiff, body quivering. Rachel's hand tightened on the flashlight. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud as the rain. "Whatever's under there," she whispered. "It's been waiting a long time." Rex gave one short bark, the kind that meant he'd found what he was looking for. And outside, beyond the glass, the drone light blinked once more before vanishing into the storm. By late morning, the storm had thinned to a mist that clung to the pines like breath on glass. The woods behind the cabin felt older than the road, older than the logging scars on the far ridge. Rachel carried a coil of nylon rope she had found in the cabin shed and a small pack with bottled water and a first aid kit. Eli walked ahead with Rex on a loose lead. Grace trailed behind with a flashlight, even though daylight was enough. Mia hopped from rock to rock like she was following a game only she could see. Rex stopped without warning. His head lifted, his nostrils flared. He tugged once, hard, and pulled Eli off the faint deer path toward a tangle of vine and knuckled roots. The dog gave a short bark and sank his paws into the ground cover, clawing in fast, decisive strokes. Damp soil flew back in clumps. Eli laughed, breathless. He looked over his shoulder. He thinks he has something. Rachel joined him and pushed aside a curtain of wild grape. Beneath the vines was stone. Not a boulder, but a ring of hand-set blocks, each the size of a loaf of bread. The circle was filled with collapsed wood and wet leaves. A well, old as the grove around it. Grace shivered. It looks like a mouth. Rex set his paws on the rim and peered down, tail stiff. A low rumble built in his chest. Not fear, Rachel realized. Focus. They cleared the opening with careful hands, lifting broken boards and sodden brush. The air that rose was cool and clean, not rotten. When the last of the debris was gone, Rachel ran her fingers over the stones. On the third block to the left, near where the moss thinned, she found a shallow carving no bigger than a quarter. A leaf with 5 points and a stem. A maple. Rachel caught her breath. In Eleanor's journal, the leaf had been sketched in the margins beside the words, Heart of the Home. The drawing matched this mark, even the tiny notch on the upper lobe. She called to Grace for the flashlight. A white beam slid into the shaft. The well sides were stone all the way down, then shadow. Eli fed the rope through his hands and tied a bowline around a sturdy birch trunk. He tested the knot twice, the way his gym teacher had shown him during a field trip. Rachel checked it again, then looped the end around her waist. "No way, Mom," Eli said. "I am lighter. I can get to a ledge if there is one. We do this slow and smart. You and I both know I can do it." Rachel wanted to say no, wanted to keep every child within arm's reach and go back to the cabin where the dangers had names like hunger and rent. But the hollow echo under the floorboards and the red light in the trees had erased the illusion that staying still was safe. She studied the well with a hard, practical eye and scanned the tree line. Quiet. No engines, no footprints but theirs. She nodded once. "We anchor here. I hold the line. Grace spots. Mia stays with Rex." They lowered Eli by inches. The rope soared softly over the edge. He braced his sneakers against the stones and talked the whole time. 6 feet. 10 feet. There is a change. It opens a little here. Hold, I am testing it. Okay, there is a shelf. I can stand. Light flickered as Grace adjusted the angle. Eli pressed his shoulder against the wall. A small cavity had been constructed in the masonry. Not natural, but deliberate. Just big enough for a tin to rest out of sight. "I can feel something," he called, voice echoing. "Metal. I have it." He wedged the object against his chest and climbed hand over hand while Rachel and Grace took the slack. When Eli swung over the rim, mud streaked his face and a grin split his cheeks. He set a metal box on the ground. The lid was wrapped in oilskin and secured with brass snaps gone green with age. Mia leaned against Rex's shoulder. "Is that what she wanted us to find?" she asked. Rex's ears stood tall. He pressed his muzzle to the box and snorted as if to say yes and hurry. Rachel unwrapped it on the moss. Inside, layered under waxed cloth, were sheaves of paper bound with twine and a map folded until the creases had turned to silk. A brass compass lay on top, heavy as a river stone. Its face was engraved not only with cardinal points, but with symbols Rachel recognized from the journal and from the carved stone under the hearth. Leaves, tiny triangles, a shallow curve like a creek bend. Grace whispered, "This is real." Rachel slid one packet free. The top pages were land records, deeds, assessments. Some bore the county seal. Others carried the names of families she did not know. Every so often, an entry line had been scraped and rewritten in a different hand. In the margins of several pages, initials repeated with steady pressure. J. Whitmore. Then, in later sheets, W. Turner, a county clerk. The dates matched Eleanor's notes. Eli unfolded the cloth map on a flattish rock. It was a survey of Pine Valley from the 1930s. Original boundaries drawn in black ink, later red lines superimposed like veins that cut through homesteads and stitched whole tracts into a single block labeled Black Ridge Timber. The red ran over the black like a lie told so often it looked like truth. Mia touched the compass with one small finger. It hummed in her imagination. She looked at Rex. He kept his eyes on the trees. Rachel closed the box and lifted her head. "We need help, not the sheriff. Someone who will not hand this back to the people who buried it." Grace said the name first because she had listened to the old women at the general store the day before while the clerk rang up canned soup. Rachel called him anyway to be sure. Noah Reed, young attorney. Fights, county code tickets for ranchers, teaches a free clinic at the library on Tuesdays. Filed a lawsuit last year against Black Ridge over a road that suddenly moved a fence. He had lost that case. He had smiled in the news photo anyway. Rachel stepped away from the well to find a signal. 2 bars. She explained fast and steady. The cabin, the journal, the mark on the well, the box, the papers, the map, the compass. When she finished, there was only wind on the line for 2 seconds. "Do not post a word." Noah said, "Do not hand that box to anyone. I am on my way. 30 minutes, if the road is passable. You believe me. I have been waiting for someone to find what everyone in this town pretends is a ghost story. Stay where you are." She hung up and returned to the well. Eli had his hands on his knees, catching his breath. Grace stared at the compass like it might start speaking. Mia was humming to the rhythm of the trees, a tune that was older than any song Rachel knew. Rex stood between the family and the timber line. He was still as a statue, except for his eyes. They tracked the shadows with a soldier's patience. A twig snapped beyond the birches. Rex lowered his head. The rumble returned to his chest. Rachel signaled with her palm for quiet. She scanned the undergrowth. Then she saw it. A black plastic strap nailed high into a pine, and a lens the size of a coin where the strap met bark. A trail camera. Fresh. The metal head of the nail gleamed where the hammer had scuffed it. Someone had mounted it after the storm began. Not weeks ago. Not months ago. She moved slowly along the arc of trees. Another camera faced the well from the opposite side. And there in the mud, a tire print with a tread she had seen before on logging trucks. It led back toward a spur road they had not noticed on their way in. Grace found her voice. Someone knew we would find this. Or someone was afraid we would. Rachel said. They carried the box and the compass back to the cabin in a tight file, Rex on point, Eli behind him with the rope coiled across his shoulder. Mia took the folded map like a sacred book. Grace kept the flashlight ready in her left hand and the journal pressed to her chest with her right. Rachel walked backward for the last stretch, eyes on the trees. Noah Reed's SUV pulled into the clearing 20 minutes later, covered in road mud from bumper to hood. He stepped out in jeans, a wool jacket, and boots that looked borrowed. Wind pushed his hair off his forehead. He shook Rachel's hand and took in the sight of the box, the children, the dog, The cabin, the well line still visible as a darker ribbon through the grass. "I need to see what you found." Inside, he handled the papers the way a medic handles a wound. He checked seals, signatures, paper stock, the way ink feathered at the edges. He matched parcel numbers to the old survey and to a screenshot from the current county GIS on his phone. He never once said, "This cannot be real." He only said two things, over and over: slow down and keep breathing. Finally, he set the last sheet down and looked up. His face had lost its open boyishness. He was all spine now. "These are not copies. These are originals, and they show a pattern of falsified transfers that cut through 3 decades and 2 generations. If even half of this holds up, Blackridge timber is sitting on stolen ground." He touched the compass. "And this ties to more than the well. That mark under your hearth is a map key." Rachel felt her throat tighten. "What does this mean for us?" "It means you are holding the first clean path I have seen in years. It means we move fast and make everything public at the right time. It means they will come for this box." Rex stood, as if on cue. He stared at the door, the hair along his spine lifted. Noah lowered his voice. "And it means you should not be alone out here tonight." From the trees came the faint electric whir they had heard before, a sound like a large insect that had forgotten how to die. The drone rose above the clearing and hovered just out of reach. Rex stepped onto the porch and barked once. The sound cracked the quiet like a rifle. The drone adjusted, wobbled, and pulled back into the fog. He watched until the hum was gone. Then he returned to the doorway and rested his head against Rachel's hip, like he had delivered a message and would stay until she understood. Noah gathered the documents and slid them into his waterproof case. "I will file a notice with the county tonight. Emergency petition. Chain of custody. A request for a protective order on the records." He looked at the children and then at Rachel. "I cannot promise this will be easy. I can promise I will not blink." Rachel nodded. She felt the familiar weight of fear, but it sat beside something larger: the papers, the map, the compass, the mark in the stone, the well, the dog who had found all of it with nothing but instinct and a voice no one else could hear. Grace whispered what they were all thinking. What if Eleanor is not the only one who left a trail? Rex lifted his head and stared at the hearth. The floor there had settled, and one plank near the stone had shifted just enough to show a darker line. A seam. Noah saw it too. He smiled for the first time. "Then I think the heart of this home still has something to say." The story broke faster than Rachel could have imagined. Someone at the courthouse must have leaked it. By Tuesday morning, a blog post titled "Lost Whitmore Records Found by Homeless Family in Old Cabin" had made its way through Pine Valley's rumor mill. Within a day, it wasn't just talk, it was a warning. Rachel stared at her phone, scrolling through the thread. Anonymous comments, some mocking, others defensive, and one that made her blood run cold. "Blackridge timber doesn't lose. Better watch your step." She turned off the phone and looked out the window. The woods no longer felt like protection. They felt like a trap. Noah arrived that afternoon, mud on his boots and worry carved deep in his face. "They know," he said simply. "I got a call from the county clerk's office. Ethan Blackridge's lawyers filed a motion to freeze public access to all land records. They're trying to bury it again." Rachel set the kettle on the old stove. "We can't just sit here." "That's exactly what we're not going to do," Noah replied. "But we need evidence from the official archives. The originals you found are damning, but if we can trace them to government records, they can't deny it." Rex, who had been lying by the door, lifted his head suddenly. His ears twitched. Then he growled, a deep, low rumble that came from his chest like thunder. "What is it, boy?" Eli asked. Rex stood, muscles tense, his gaze fixed upward, past the window. Rachel followed his eyes and saw it, a faint glint above the tree line, something metallic caught between branches. A drone. Before she could move, Rex shot out through the open door, sprinting into the rain. His bark cracked through the air. Branches snapped as he leapt and clawed at the trees. The drone buzzed higher, but it was too close, too low. Rachel ran outside. "Rex!" With a burst of force, Rex lunged, caught a low-hanging vine and yanked it. The vine whipped across the drone's propeller, sending the device spinning. It crashed into the mud with a sickening crunch of plastic and metal. Eli ran to it first. The camera lens was still blinking red. He smashed it with a rock until it went dark. "They're watching us," Grace whispered. "Even out here." Noah picked up the drone's body carefully. "This isn't a toy. It's surveillance grade. Whoever sent it knows exactly where you are." Rachel looked towards the ridge, the clouds rolling in thick and heavy. "Then we move fast, before they decide to do more than watch." By nightfall, she and Noah drove into town. The kids stayed behind under Eli's watch, with Rex pacing by the window like a sentry. Rain started again, hard and cold, tapping the cabin roof like a heartbeat. At the Pine Valley Library, the air smelled of dust and secrets. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Kellerman, recognized the name Whitmore instantly. "She worked for the county assessor's office," she said softly. "Disappeared in 1957. People said she was delusional, obsessed with the timber company's books. My grandmother called her brave." They searched the archives for hours, pulling old maps, ledgers, and microfilm records. Each file revealed another family that had lost everything between 1942 and 1959, always for failure to pay taxes. But in nearly every case, the signatures on the deeds didn't match the original owners. Noah looked up from a ledger, his voice low. "Eleanor was right. The transfers were forged, and the fake assessor's mark, this one, was used across 27 parcels. That's half the valley." Rachel's hands trembled on the edge of the table. "And all of it went to Blackridge Timber." He nodded. "Which means if this goes to court, Ethan Blackridge could lose everything his family built on stolen land." They gathered copies of the documents and drove back under pounding rain. The mountain road had turned to sludge. Thunder rolled so close it rattled the steering wheel. When they reached the cabin, the lights were out. "Eli?" Rachel called. No answer, only the sound of the storm pressing on the walls. Then a low bark came from the dark corner. Rex. His fur was slick, his body trembling, eyes locked on the open back door. Rachel flicked on a flashlight. Muddy footprints led from the porch into the woods. Small ones. "Eli," she whispered. Grace appeared from the loft, her eyes red. "He went after the noise. Said he heard something out there, maybe someone calling. He thought it was you." Rachel's stomach twisted. "How long ago?" 10 minutes, Grace said, voice cracking. "I told him not to go." Noah grabbed his jacket. "We go together." Rachel shook her head. "No, you stay with the girls. If I don't come back, drive to town and call the sheriff." She stepped into the storm, flashlight cutting through sheets of rain. Rex bounded ahead, nose down, barking once every few seconds to keep her on his trail. The forest roared around them. "Eli!" she shouted. "Answer me!" Lightning split the sky, revealing a flash of movement by the creek. Eli, kneeling, trying to untangle his foot from a fallen branch. "Mom!" His voice cracked with relief. But before she could reach him, Rex stopped dead. He growled, a sharp, warning growl that made Rachel's skin prickle. She followed his gaze. Behind Eli, half concealed by a tree trunk, was a figure in a raincoat. "Who's there?" Rachel yelled. The person turned and ran into the darkness. Rex bolted after them. Branches whipped as the dog tore through the brush, barking with pure fury. Rachel reached Eli and pulled him close. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, breathless. "I thought it was you calling me." "I wasn't," she whispered. "Let's go." They stumbled back towards the cabin, the storm clawing at their backs. Rex returned minutes later, soaked and panting, a scrap of torn fabric clenched in his teeth. Dark blue, with a small embroidered insignia that Rachel recognized from the side of the fallen drone. Noah met them at the door, eyes widening when he saw it. "That's corporate security. Blackridge." Rachel took the fabric, her hands trembling. "They're not just watching anymore." Thunder rolled across Pine Valley again, deep and hollow, echoing off the hills like the growl of something ancient waking up. Rex stood in the doorway, fur bristling, eyes glowing with defiance. For the first time, Rachel realized that the fight wasn't about a cabin, or old papers, or even justice. It was survival, and Rex, her loyal companion, had already chosen his side. The storm had not ended. It had only changed its voice. The thunder rolled deeper now, slow and constant, like something breathing under the hills. Rachel gripped the flashlight as she and Grace followed Rex's silhouette through the woods. The rain blurred everything into motion, branches, shadows, even her own fear. Rex moved ahead, sure-footed, his fur dark with water, his tail cutting through the storm like a compass needle. "Mom, slow down!" Grace gasped. "I can't see him anymore." "He knows where Eli is," Rachel said, pushing forward. "Just keep close." Lightning flashed, lighting the forest in white. For a single second, Rachel saw Rex standing on a rise, barking toward an old oak split, clean down the middle. The trunk twisted into a shape that looked like a giant X. When they reached it, Eli was there, soaked, shivering, but alive. He sat at the roots, clutching a slab of stone. The edges were carved, worn by time, but the mark in the center was clear, a leaf-shaped crest, same as the one on the well stone. Rachel dropped to her knees and pulled him into her arms. "Eli, I told you never to run out in a storm like that." He was trembling too hard to speak at first. "I heard her," he finally managed. "A woman. She said this is the second key." Rachel looked at the stone. "The second key?" Eli nodded, his eyes wide. "There's another one, Mum. She said the heart won't open without both." Rex barked once, circling the tree, his paws kicking up mud. He paused and pressed his nose against the carved symbol, whined softly, then turned back toward the cabin as if to say, "We're not done." Grace wiped the rain from her face. "Let's go home before this storm kills us." The three of them followed Rex back through the forest. The dog led fast but careful, checking over his shoulder to be sure they followed. Rachel carried the stone wrapped in her jacket. It was heavier than it looked, colder too. When they reached the cabin, the power was out. Noah's SUV was gone. He had left before the storm worsened. Rachel unlocked the door and froze. Mud tracks. Not theirs. Someone had been inside. Grace whispered, "Mom, stay behind me." Rachel's voice was low, sharp. She took the fire poker from beside the stove and moved through each room. Empty. The beds were untouched, the windows closed. But near the back door she saw it. A muddy boot print, large, heavy, and fresh. Rex growled deep in his chest, sniffing the air. His nose went straight to the floor by the hearth. He barked once, twice, sharp, warning barks. Whoever it was, Rachel said quietly. They were looking for something. The rain pressed against the roof like fists. Grace shut the door tight and bolted it. "You think it's them? The company?" Rachel didn't answer. Her hands shook as she picked up the phone. A signal flickered, weak but steady. She dialed Noah. He answered on the first ring. "Rachel, listen. I just got out of the clerk's office. Ethan Blackridge's team filed a motion for possession this morning. They're claiming you're trespassing on company property. You've got 20 days before enforcement." 20 days, she repeated. "Before they drag us out? Yes, I'll fight it, but you need to stay somewhere safe." "There's nowhere safe," she said softly. "They already know where we are." Noah's tone hardened. "Then find the rest of what Eleanor hid. Whatever she left, it's the only thing that can expose them before the deadline." Rachel's eyes went to the stone on the table. The second key. Rain hammered the windows. Rex barked again, facing the hearth, then lay down before it. He pressed his paws against the wood planks, ears forward, waiting. Grace looked between them. "Mom, what if it's under there?" Rachel sank beside Rex, her hand brushing his wet fur. "The heart of the home," she murmured. "That's what Eleanor wrote." Rex's tail thumped once. His eyes met hers, steady, fierce. Eli joined them, holding the carved stone. "Mom, if this is the second key, then the first must already be here. Maybe the compass. Or the well." Rachel stared at the faint crack in the floorboards, a dark line she hadn't noticed before. "Help me move the rug." They pushed the furniture aside and peeled back the old rug. The planks underneath were uneven. In the center, one board looked newer, less weathered than the others. Rachel found a loose nail and pried it up with the poker. The plank came free with a sigh of air, cold, earthy, and old. Beneath it was a hollow cavity. Inside, wrapped in decayed cloth, was a tin cylinder sealed with wax. Eli's voice shook. "Is that it?" Rachel didn't move. She glanced at Rex, who was already standing, tail stiff, nose hovering above the open space. He gave a low growl, not of warning this time, but of certainty. Grace knelt beside her mother. "What's inside?" Rachel lifted the cylinder gently, feeling the weight. It wasn't heavy, just the weight of history, of truth waiting too long to be told. "We'll open it when Noah gets back," she said quietly. Together. Outside, lightning forked across the valley, bright enough to turn the windows white. For a split second, Rachel saw something reflected in the glass, a shape at the edge of the woods, holding what looked like binoculars. Then it was gone. She swallowed hard. "Everyone stays close tonight." They barricaded the door, drew the curtains, and sat near the fire. The tin sat on the table between them, water dripping from its surface. Grace dozed off against Rachel's shoulder, and Eli curled on the floor beside Rex, his hand resting on the dog's back. Rachel watched the flames dance across the walls, shadows twisting like ghosts of the past. The cabin creaked and sighed, as though breathing again after years of silence. Rex stayed, awake. His gaze never left the fireplace. Every now and then, his ears twitched, his head tilting slightly, as if hearing something beyond the reach of human sound. Whispers of the woman who once lived here, guiding him still. Rachel whispered into the quiet. "Eleanor, what did you want us to find?" The fire popped, a log shifting deeper into the embers. Beneath the floor, something echoed, a faint metallic click, like a lock waiting for its second key. Rex raised his head, eyes bright in the firelight. Rachel felt her heart tighten. She looked at the tin again, then at the floor. The secret wasn't out there in the forest. It wasn't buried in old wells or under oak trees. It was right here, under their feet, beneath the warmth and fear and hope of the home they were fighting for. And as the storm raged on, Rachel realized the truth Eleanor had left behind wasn't just about stolen land. It was about the line between courage and surrender, about when to stop running and start fighting back. Rex let out one short bark, sharp and final, as if to say he agreed. Then he settled down again, guarding the heart of the house, the secret, and the family that would have to face whatever came next. The storm broke at dawn, leaving behind a grey stillness that felt wrong. Too quiet, too heavy. The air smelled of wet pine and something metallic, like the world had paused mid-breath. Rachel stood by the hearth, staring at the faint seam between the stones. Noah had returned just before sunrise, his face drawn and his clothes streaked with mud. He'd barely stepped through the door before Rex had started pacing again, nose low, tail straight, eyes fixed on the fire pit as if waiting for permission. Rachel knelt beside him. "Show me, boy," she whispered. Rex pressed his snout into the crack between the hearthstones and gave a sharp bark. Then he started to dig, first with one paw, then both. The scrape of his nails against stone was steady, urgent. Noah crouched beside Rachel, shining his flashlight along the seam. "There's something here," he said quietly. "You can feel the draft." Rachel brushed her hand across the stone, and cold air licked her fingers. A hollow space. They worked together, prying loose the edge of a slab until it shifted with a deep, grinding sigh. Beneath it, a narrow gap revealed iron hinges and a recessed handle blackened with age. Eli's voice trembled. "A door. Mum, there's a door." Rex barked again, pawing at the edge. His eyes burned with focus. "Step back," Noah said. He wedged a crowbar from his tool bag under the lip of the handle and pulled hard. The stone lifted, groaning, revealing a square opening just wide enough for a person to slip through. A rush of cool, dry air rose from below. Rachel peered inside. A short ladder descended into darkness. She turned to her children. "Stay close behind me. No one touches anything until I say so." They climbed down one by one, Noah last, sealing the slab behind them. The beam of the flashlight cut through the dust. The space below was larger than it should have been, an entire room carved into the earth. The walls were lined with shelves. On them sat rows of glass-sealed boxes, metal file tins, and stacks of thick ledgers bound in leather. Grace whispered, "It's like a time capsule." Noah moved to one of the shelves, brushing dust from a file. "Or an archive," he said. "She hid everything." Rachel opened one of the tins. Inside were faded deeds stamped with the county seal, maps marked in red ink, receipts, tax ledgers, all dated between 1946 and 1957. Her hands shook as she flipped through them. "These are originals," she murmured. "Every fraudulent transfer Eleanor mentioned. It's all here." Noah picked up a sealed envelope from a metal box on the central table. The wax bore Eleanor Whitmore's initials. He slit it open with his pocket knife and unfolded a yellowed document. His eyes widened. "It's a notarized confession," he said, his voice unsteady. "Signed by William Turner, the county land officer. Dated October 1957. Rachel took it from him, reading the first lines aloud. "I, William Turner, do hereby confess that under coercion and payment by Black Ridge Timber, I falsified land records, transferring 427 acres of Pine Valley to the company without consent of the rightful owners." She stopped. Her throat closed around the words. Eli whispered, "That means they stole everything." Noah nodded slowly. "And now we can prove it." Rex whined softly, his head turning toward the far corner. Rachel followed his gaze. There, in a locked glass case, lay a smaller tin and a folded sheet of parchment. On it, in careful handwriting, was a single line. "To those seeking shelter and truth, this home is yours." Rachel's breath caught. "It's a will," she said. "Eleanor's will." Noah's eyes glinted. Then this place was meant to be found. They photographed every page, every ledger, every map. Grace carefully sealed the documents in plastic sleeves while Eli held the flashlight steady. The deeper they looked, the clearer the picture became. Decades of deceit buried beneath a fireplace, and the woman who had risked everything to expose it. When they finally climbed back up, the morning had turned sharp, and pale. The air above ground felt heavier, as if the storm had only been a warning. Rachel placed the files in Noah's waterproof case. "We take this straight to the sheriff," she said. But Rex didn't move. He stood at the door, body rigid, ears pricked forward. Noah's hand went to his pocket instinctively. "Someone's outside." Rachel peeked through the curtain. 2 black SUVs idled at the edge of the clearing. Men in dark jackets stepped out, their faces hidden under hoods. One carried a radio. Another held something worse, a shotgun. "Ethan's men," Noah whispered. Before Rachel could answer, the front door rattled. A voice called out, muffled but cold. "Mrs. Carter, Mr. Reed, you've been trespassing on private land. Step outside." Eli clutched his mother's sleeve. "Mom, what do we do?" Noah unzipped his bag, pushing the evidence inside. "We stole them. Sheriff Miller's on his way. I called him before I left town." Rex growled, the sound deep and primal. Rachel felt his body vibrating with tension. The door burst open. 2 men stepped in, soaked in rain, eyes hard. One raised the shotgun toward Noah. "Give me the files." Rex moved before anyone else did. He lunged, teeth flashing, knocking the man backward into the doorframe. The gun clattered to the floor. The second man swung a flashlight, catching Rex across the ribs. The dog barely flinched. He turned and clamped down on the man's arm, dragging him to the ground. "No!" Rachel shouted. "Rex, stop!" But the fight was chaos. Shouting, rain, the slam of boots. Noah grabbed the gun and kicked it under the table. Eli pulled Grace behind the hearth while Rachel grabbed the nearest thing she could, a poker, and swung it against the man trying to stand. A siren wailed in the distance, faint but growing. The attackers hesitated. Then one hissed, "We're not done," and bolted through the door. The other stumbled after him, clutching his bleeding arm. Rex stood panting in the doorway, chest heaving, rain and blood streaking his fur. Moments later, Sheriff Miller's cruiser slid into the clearing. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. They cornered the men near the SUVs, cuffing them against the hoods. Miller approached, his hat dripping with rain. His eyes scanned the scene, the broken door, the bruised lawyer, the trembling family, and the German shepherd standing guard. "You folks all right?" Rachel nodded, still shaking. "They tried to take the files." Noah handed over the sealed envelope and the confession. "We have proof, Sheriff. Eleanor Whitmore's records, her will, everything." Miller read the top of the page and whistled softly. "I've been sheriff here 15 years. I knew Blackridge had power, but this is going to burn the whole county clean." Rachel looked down at Rex. He stood beside her, eyes alert but calm, his fur matted with mud and rain. She knelt and pressed her hand against his neck. "You saved us again, didn't you, boy?" He leaned his head against her shoulder, quiet, watchful, as if listening to something only he could hear. Maybe the echo of Eleanor's voice, maybe the heartbeat of the house that had kept its secret too long. Outside, the sky began to clear. The rain stopped. For the first time in weeks, sunlight broke through the clouds, washing over the cabin like a benediction. Sheriff Miller turned to his deputies. "Get these men booked and make sure the county clerk sees that confession before sunset." He looked back at Rachel and Noah. "You did good. You both did. But I think your dog did. The real work." Rachel smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "He always does." Rex looked out across Pine Valley, ears twitching as the last echo of thunder faded over the hills. The storm was gone, but the war for truth had just begun. The courthouse in Pine Valley had never seen so many cameras. Trucks lined the street, reporters crowded the steps, and the cold March wind scattered their notes like confetti. Inside, the smell of wet coats and nervous sweat mixed with the sterile scent of polished wood. Rachel sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Noah stood beside her, flipping through files with the calm precision of someone who had rehearsed every move. Across the aisle, Ethan Blackridge leaned back in his chair, immaculate in a tailored suit, his smile sharp and practiced. Rex lay at Rachel's feet, silent but alert, head resting between his paws. His ears flicked each time a camera shutter clicked. "Mrs. Carter?" Judge Rowan began, peering over his glasses. "You're the petitioner in this emergency hearing. The matter before the court concerns the alleged fraudulent acquisition of multiple parcels in Pine Valley dating back to 1946. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Rachel replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Proceed." Noah stepped forward. "Your Honor, what we bring today isn't rumor or hearsay. It's proof. Original land deeds, forged tax assessments, and a notarized confession signed by a county officer in 1957. All discovered in a sealed chamber beneath the Whitmore property, the same property Mrs. Carter and her children have been residing in since January." He placed a thick binder on the evidence table. "These documents show that Blackridge Timber, under Ethan Blackridge's grandfather, systematically stole over 400 acres of privately owned land. The Whitmore estate, where these records were found, was ground zero for the cover-up." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Cameras clicked. Ethan's lawyer, a slick man named Garrett Lowe, stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The documents are unverified. This woman has no claim to that property. She's a squatter." Noah didn't flinch. "Your Honor, the documents have already been authenticated by the state archives. The chain of custody has been logged and witnessed by Sheriff Miller." He turned to the sheriff, seated near the front row. Miller gave a firm nod. Judge Rowan raised an eyebrow. "Objection overruled. Continue." Ethan leaned forward, his voice smooth and confident. "Mrs. Carter, I sympathize with your difficult situation. But let's be realistic. My company employs half this county. Mistakes were made decades ago by men long dead. Why drag everyone through this when we can settle like civilized people?" He opened a folder and slid a single page across the table. $250,000. Tax-free. You and your children can start over anywhere you like. Rachel stared at the number. For a moment, the temptation cut through her exhaustion like a blade. Months of running, sleeping in a car, fear that tomorrow might bring nothing but hunger, all could end with one signature. Then she looked down. Rex had lifted his head, eyes locked on her, unblinking as if reading her thoughts. Rachel took a breath. Eleanor Whitmore didn't risk her life for a payout, she said softly, but her words carried through the room. "She fought for the truth. I won't sell it." The room fell silent. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Be careful, Mrs. Carter. The truth can ruin people." Rachel met his stare. "So can greed." Judge Rowan cleared his throat. "Enough. Mr. Reed, continue with your witness list." Noah flipped to the next page of his notes. "Your Honor, we'd like to call our final witness, Mabel Porter." Gasps moved through the crowd. Rachel turned in surprise. Mabel, the kind old woman who ran the general store, who had quietly slipped them groceries and blankets, was walking down the aisle. Her grey hair was pinned neatly, her eyes steady. She carried a single worn folder. Ethan whispered something to his attorney, his smile faltering for the first time. The clerk swore Mabel in. She took the stand and looked around the room before settling her gaze on Rachel. "I wasn't going to speak," she began, her voice clear and unshaken. "But seeing what this family has been through, I can't keep quiet anymore." Noah stepped closer. "Mrs. Porter, could you tell the court how you're connected to Eleanor Whitmore?" Mabel nodded slowly. "She was my mother." The words landed like thunder. The courtroom erupted, whispers, gasps, the shuffle of reporters. Even the judge leaned forward. "She gave birth to me in 1953. Mabel continued, tears glinting in her eyes. When the threats started, she knew her life was in danger. She sent me away to be adopted by a family friend before she disappeared. I only learned the truth when I turned 18 and found her letters. She opened the folder. Inside were 3 yellowed envelopes, each written in the same looping script Rachel recognized from the journal. She wrote about the stolen land, about the fear, and about one thing she hoped would survive her: the house. She said, "The home will guard the truth until someone worthy finds it." Ethan shot to his feet. "This is absurd. Anyone could have forged those letters." Judge Rowan slammed his gavel once. "Sit down, Mr. Blackridge." Noah gestured towards the letters. "Your Honor, handwriting experts have already verified these match the documents from the Whitmore archives." The judge studied Mabel quietly. "Mrs. Porter, you're saying you are Eleanor Whitmore's biological daughter?" "Yes, sir. And I'm saying the woman sitting right there," she pointed to Rachel, "fulfilled the last wish my mother ever wrote. She found the truth and gave her a voice again." Rachel felt something break open inside her, a flood of relief, grief, and gratitude all at once. She hadn't done it for recognition, but hearing those words felt like being seen for the first time. Rex shifted closer to her feet, pressing his head gently against her knee. Judge Rowan sat back, adjusting his glasses. "Given the new testimony and the authenticated records, this court grants a stay of eviction effective immediately. Further, I am ordering a full investigation into Blackridge Timber and its historical acquisitions." Ethan stood rigid, color draining from his face. His lawyer muttered something about appeals, but no one was listening. Noah exhaled, shoulders sagging for the first time in days. Rachel reached down and stroked Rex's head. "We did it, boy," she whispered. As the crowd filed out, reporters shouting questions, Mabel approached Rachel quietly. She took her hand. "My mother would have been proud of you," she said. "She loved this valley, and she believed truth always finds its way home." Rachel felt tears burn her eyes. "Then maybe it finally has." Outside the courthouse, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time that day. Rex trotted beside her, head high, tail flicking, as if he understood that justice wasn't just won. It was carried, protected, and guarded, one heartbeat at a time. And as they walked down the courthouse steps, Rachel looked up at the clear blue sky and whispered, "Thank you, Eleanor." Rex barked once, sharp and sure, echoing across Pine Valley like the sound of a promise kept. 3 weeks later, Pine Valley was buried under snow, the kind that softened sound, muted color, and made even old sins look forgiven. The mountains wore white crowns, and the frozen river gleamed like glass. The world felt quiet again, different. Rachel stood on the porch of the cabin that had once been her refuge, her battleground, and now her home. Smoke rose from the chimney in a straight grey line. Inside, the fire crackled, and the smell of wood smoke mingled with coffee. Rex lay curled by the doorway, his muzzle now more silver than brown. He blinked up at her, tail thumping once. Age had settled into his bones, but his eyes, those bright, knowing eyes, still held the same fire that had led them through the storm, through fear, through everything. "Morning, hero," Rachel murmured, scratching behind his ear. He sighed, content. From the radio on the table, the morning broadcast drifted out. And in state news, Blackridge Timber has agreed to pay restitution for historical land theft across Pine County. The settlement includes a $32 million fine and the forfeiture of nearly 2/3 of its holdings. The court has established the Eleanor Whitmore Trust Fund, which will oversee land restoration and community development. Mabel Porter has been appointed as legal guardian of the trust. Rachel smiled faintly. "Eleanor, you finally won." The cabin's front path was cleared now, thanks to Eli, who had taken pride in shoveling before breakfast. Grace and Mia were building a snow fort by the tree line, their laughter sharp and bright in the cold air. It was the first time Rachel had heard them laugh like that since before the storm. Noah's old SUV pulled into the clearing, tires crunching on the frozen ground. He stepped out, scarf tight around his neck, a folder tucked under his arm. "You still don't answer your phone," he said with a grin. Rachel shrugged, smiling. "Out here, I get better reception from the trees." He laughed, handing her the folder. "Mabel wanted you to have this. It's official now, lifetime residency. The trust recognizes this cabin as a heritage site. No one can take it from you." Rachel opened the folder. Her name, printed clearly on the certificate, sat beside a simple line in blue ink. "To those seeking shelter and truth, this home is yours." She swallowed hard. She really wrote that. "She did," Noah said, "and you proved her right." They stood in the quiet for a moment, watching the snow drift from the branches. Down the slope, the old well was capped and marked with a wooden sign carved by local school children, "Rex's Well of Truth." The town had adopted his story like a legend. The Pine Valley Gazette had printed a front-page photo of Rex standing in the courthouse steps beside Rachel, captioned, "The dog that found the truth." There were already postcards and mugs being sold in town, and the elementary school was raising money for a new animal shelter in his name. Rex, of course, knew none of it. He only knew the cabin, the woods, and the people who loved him. Rachel turned to Noah. "So, what happens now? The big hero lawyer rides off to the next broken town?" Noah smiled softly. "Actually, the big hero lawyer's thinking of staying." He hesitated, then added, "You and that dog changed how this town remembers itself. And how I remember myself." Rachel looked at him for a long time, snow catching in her hair. "That sounds dangerously close to a confession, Mr. Reed." "It is," he admitted, "but not the kind that needs a notary." She laughed, light, unguarded, the way she hadn't in years. Mabel arrived later that afternoon, wrapped in a thick coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. She brought a tin of biscuits and a folded envelope. "From the trust," she said, pressing it into Rachel's hand. "We wanted to thank you for giving my mother her name back." Rachel opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in elegant script. Mabel's, but echoing Eleanor's words. "Truth doesn't die. It waits for courage to wake it." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked at Mabel, at the trees beyond, at the cabin that had somehow survived everything. "You don't owe me anything," she said softly. "We just followed her voice." Mabel smiled. "Sometimes, that's what courage is, listening when others stopped." As evening fell, the valley turned gold under the sinking sun. Rachel walked out with Rex to the edge of the clearing. Snow creaked beneath her boots. He moved slower now, each step deliberate. But when the wind shifted, he lifted his head, sniffing the air like he was still searching for something unseen. Rachel knelt beside him. "You found more than a home, didn't you?" She whispered. "You found justice." Rex nudged her hand once, then looked toward the mountains. His ears twitched. The faint echo of church bells drifted from the town below. A sound of peace, of ending. Back at the cabin, the fire burned low. The children were asleep, their laughter still clinging to the air like warmth. Noah had stayed for dinner, and for once there was no talk of deadlines or hearings. Just quiet. Rachel sat by the window, watching the snow fall. Outside, the well glowed faintly under the moonlight. The sign, "Rex's Well of Truth," caught the silver light, shining like a promise kept. Rex stirred in his sleep, tail twitching once, and let out a soft, contented sigh. Rachel whispered, "Rest easy, boy. You've done enough." In the distance, the wind moved through the trees with the soft hum of a woman's voice, gentle, eternal, grateful. And for the first time since that night in the storm, Rachel felt no fear in the silence. Only peace. A year had passed since the storm that changed everything. Pine Valley no longer whispered about the Whitmore cabin. It spoke of it with pride. What had once been an abandoned refuge now stood reborn beneath a new name, the Eleanor Whitmore Memorial Home. Snow still dusted the peaks of the Montana mountains, but spring had already begun to thaw the valley. The cabin's wooden beams gleamed with new polish, the garden bloomed with color, and laughter filled the clearing again. Not just Rachel's children, but others too. Inside, Rachel guided a young woman through the main hall. "We started with 1 room," she said, smiling. "Now we have 5, and the county's helped expand the project." The woman, Jenna, a 26-year-old single mother recently escaping an abusive home, nodded, her eyes wide as she took in the warmth of the place. The smell of baking bread drifted from the kitchen, and sunlight spilled through freshly cleaned windows. "Feels safe here," Jenna whispered. Rachel smiled. That's what Eleanor wanted. The cabin had become more than a home. It was a sanctuary. With Mabel Porter overseeing the trust fund and Noah handling legal work, they had turned Eleanor's dream into something tangible. Each month, the home hosted single mothers, displaced veterans, and those starting over. They came broken, uncertain, but they left stronger. On the wall near the fireplace hung a framed quote in elegant lettering: "Truth sleeps beneath. Justice wakes above." Rachel ran her hand over the woodwork beneath it, remembering the secret room, the dust-covered ledgers, the fear, and the faith that brought them all here. Outside, Eli's voice echoed across the field. "Rex, come on, buddy, heel!" The young boy, now 15, was taller, stronger, and filled with the restless energy of someone becoming himself. He stood beside a group of local teens and veterans, each paired with a dog. Their training ground had once been the meadow behind the cabin, now fenced and marked with a wooden sign: Rex's Instinct, Search and Rescue Training Program. Rex had passed the torch to the next generation, or rather to the dogs who followed his lead. Though older now, his hearing dull and gait slower, he remained the program's symbol. His photograph, standing proud before the well where it all began, hung in every training folder. Noah had helped connect the program with the state's rescue division. Eli's idea, to teach veterans and teens how to train dogs for search and rescue missions, had taken root fast. It gave the kids discipline and the veterans purpose. "Good boy," Eli called as a shepherd pup named Valor responded to a whistle, circling back perfectly. Eli bent down, scratching the dog's chin. "That's it, just like Rex taught you." Rex sat by the fence, watching, his tail tapping once against the ground as if approving. Grace, now 12, sat on the porch steps nearby, her laptop open. Her essay titled "Justice and Shelter: How Truth Found Us" had just won her a statewide writing scholarship. Reporters had even called the cabin to ask for interviews, but Grace had turned them all down. "The story belongs here," she told her mother. "Not on a screen." Inside the cabin, Mia sat cross-legged on the rug by the hearth, coloring. Every so often, she looked up and whispered quietly into the empty air, smiling. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" Rachel asked gently. Mia grinned, eyes bright. "Mrs. Eleanor. She says the garden will bloom early this year." Rachel's heart squeezed. The child had always had that uncanny sense, a quiet faith that connected her to something unseen. "Then I'd better get the seeds ready," she said softly. The afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the cabin gold. The valley felt alive, pulsing with history and hope. Rachel stood outside beside the memorial plaque mounted on a stone near the well. The engraving caught the light. Eleanor Whitmore Memorial Home Truth sleeps beneath. Justice wakes above. She traced the letters with her fingertips. "We kept our promise," she whispered. Noah joined her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. His coat collar was dusted with snowflakes. "You've done more than that. You turned one woman's secret into a whole town's redemption." Rachel smiled. "We did it together. You, me, the kids, Mabel, and Rex." At his name, Rex lifted his head, as if he knew he was being spoken of. His eyes, still sharp, still faithful, met hers across the yard. Noah handed her the mug. "Do you ever think about how close you came to leaving that night, before you found the cabin?" Rachel exhaled, her breath visible in the cold. "Every day. I was ready to give up." Then Rex started barking, and everything changed. It's like he knew what waited here. Noah chuckled softly. "You think he heard Eleanor calling?" Rachel looked toward the cabin, its chimney rising steady against the twilight. Maybe he did. Maybe some instincts are louder than reason. They stood in silence for a moment, watching Eli help a veteran steady his balance as a retriever obeyed commands. Grace came out with a blanket for Rex, draping it gently over him. Mia twirled through the snow, giggling. "Sometimes," Noah said quietly, "I think the world sends us what we need most when we've stopped expecting anything." Rachel smiled, her eyes warm. Like a dog who refuses to stop barking. Rex let out a low chuff, as if agreeing. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and smoke, and somewhere beyond the ridge, a church bell chimed 6 times. The sound rolled through the valley like a memory. Rachel lifted her gaze to the mountains. "You know," she said, "I used to think this place was haunted." Noah tilted his head. "And now? Now I think it's blessed." Behind them, the cabin windows glowed with firelight. Inside, laughter rose again. Grace teasing Eli, Mia singing to her invisible friend, Rex settling by the hearth. Eleanor's house, once forgotten, was alive. And though Rachel knew the world beyond Pine Valley would never know the full story, that was fine. Some truths were meant to live quietly, in wood and stone and the hearts that remembered. As snow began to fall again, Rachel whispered into the fading light, "Thank you, Eleanor, for finding us." And in that moment, just before dusk swallowed the valley, a single ray of sun broke through the clouds and struck the plaque by the well, lighting the words as if Eleanor herself had nodded in approval. Truth still slept beneath. But justice was wide awake. Dawn came softly to Pine Valley, gilding the snow-capped peaks in light the color of honey. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the smell of pine and smoke from the cabin's chimney. Frost clung to the grass like silver threads, and the forest beyond shimmered under the touch of morning sun. Rachel sat on the porch steps, wrapped in her old flannel jacket, a steaming mug in her hands. Beside her lay Rex, his body pressed close to her leg, head resting on her knee. His breathing was slower now, deep and steady, a sound she had come to depend on more than her own heartbeat. She looked out across the valley that had once been a battlefield of fear and doubt. Now it felt like a promise kept. The fields, once overgrown and desolate, had become gardens of life and laughter. The cabin, Eleanor's cabin, was no longer a secret. It was a haven. From inside, she could hear the clatter of dishes and the muffled voices of her children. Grace was helping Mia with breakfast. Eli was getting ready to meet the new volunteers for the rescue dog program. Their lives had taken root here, growing out of pain into something strong, something real. Rachel reached down and stroked the fur along Rex's neck. His eyes fluttered open, cloudy but still alert. "You still keeping watch, old boy?" she whispered. He blinked, and his tail brushed weakly against the porch. a quiet acknowledgement. She smiled. You never stopped, did you? For a while they sat together in silence, watching as sunlight crept slowly across the valley floor. The snow began to melt, revealing patches of brown earth, the first signs of spring. A bluebird landed on the porch railing, chirped once, and darted away. Rachel's gaze drifted to the memorial plaque by the well, half buried in frost. Truth sleeps beneath. Justice wakes above. Eleanor's words, and now her legacy. Behind her, the door opened. Eli stepped out, jacket half zipped, his breath misting in the cold. You coming, Mum? He asked. We're meeting the new group down by the meadow. Mabel's bringing coffee. Rachel nodded. I'll be right there. He smiled and crouched beside Rex, rubbing his ears. Morning, old man. Rex lifted his head weakly, leaning into the boy's touch. The connection between them, unspoken, eternal, made Rachel's throat tighten. When Eli went back inside, she looked down at Rex again. You know, she said softly, I never believed in signs. Not really. But that night, when you barked and led us here, I think someone was guiding us both. Rex gave a small, low rumble in his chest, not quite a growl, more like an echo. Then, with a sigh, he settled again, head heavy on her lap. Rachel looked toward the tree line. The forest was waking, alive with sound. But then, something else. A faint bark, distant, almost carried on the wind. Then another. She froze. It wasn't from the training field. It came from deep in the woods, from the same direction where she and Rex had once walked through the storm all those months ago. Rex's ears twitched, his eyes opened wide, and for the first time in weeks he pushed himself upright, muscles trembling but determined. He stared toward the forest, tail flicking once, alert. Rachel listened harder. The bark came again, clearer this time. Not an echo, not the wind. It was the sound of another dog, strong and insistent, calling from the trees. Rex barked in reply, a deep, hoarse sound that rolled across the valley like thunder. Then silence. Rachel smiled through tears. Guess they're still watching, huh? She whispered. The old shepherd leaned against her leg, eyes fixed on the horizon. For a long time, neither moved. The valley was still. The only sounds were the wind and the river, and the faint, eternal hum of life returning. The front door opened again. Grace stepped out with a scarf wrapped around her neck. Mum, breakfast's ready. Rachel nodded but didn't stand. Go ahead, I'll be in soon. Grace glanced at Rex, her voice soft. He's okay? Rachel smiled faintly. Yeah, he's home. As Grace disappeared inside, Rachel looked down at her companion one last time. His breathing was slow but peaceful. The first rays of full sunlight spilled over the trees, bathing them both in gold. Rex lifted his head once more, eyes bright, staring towards the forest as if seeing something beyond her sight. Then he let out one final bark, loud, strong, full of life. Rachel's hand trembled as she touched his fur. She didn't cry. She just whispered, We all find our way home. Somehow. The wind stirred, carrying the sound of that bark through the valley, echoing against the mountains until it blended with the faint chorus of dogs training in the distance. And for just a second, Rachel could have sworn she heard another voice beneath it, a woman's laughter, soft and free, fading into the morning light. The valley breathed. The truth had been found. Justice had awakened. The camera would pull back slowly, rising over the cabin, the well, and the snow-dusted fields that once held secrets. A new dawn glowed across Pine Valley as the world below moved quietly, healed. On screen, the final words appeared against the sunrise. He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. What's your story with a loyal pet? Then a final fade-out, Rex's bark echoing one last time, proud and eternal, calling the world to remember. Support the channel, share your story, and help honor the loyalty of every German Shepherd who never gave up.